Hey y'all, my name is Nat. I hope you're having a terrific day, and for this video I'm going to be doing a book unhaul and a book haul all in one. So with quarantine still going, I haven't had a lot of reasons to go shopping lately, which is a good thing because I've been saving money, but also a bad thing because I've been spending the rest of that money on books. Whoops. However, I have unhauled a few as well that I'm going to eventually be taking to half-price books to hopefully get some store credit. We're gonna start on the actual haul. First off, I got my new edition of Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. Bought it used, and I'm not giving any money to JK Rowling, I hope. I also bought the first two books in the Extraordinary Adventures of the Athena Club series. Yeah, this is really hard to hold, so I'm just gonna hold up the first one. As I mentioned in my mid-year freakout tag, I really loved this series. I read all three of the books this year and absolutely just devoured them. This story takes place in Victorian England surrounding a plethora of female characters who are all taken from classic horror or sci-fi novels and have been revamped into this one universe. This team of women end up joining together to try and solve mysteries. They end up forming the Athena Club and basically end up going on all of these adventures across Europe to try and save other women, take down bad guys who have wronged them. It was definitely a very fun ride. It had so many interesting characters. Our main character, Mary, is the daughter of Mr. Jekyll. She has a sister, Diana, who is the daughter of Mr. Hyde. We have a beast woman from Dr. Moreau's island. We have the female Frankenstein monster. We have Rappaccini's daughter. And along the way, more women end up joining the team. This series was just so much fun. I really enjoyed it, and I'm glad to be adding it to my shelves because I can definitely see myself rereading them. I only have the first two for now. I'm waiting for the third one to drop a little bit more in price before I buy that one because I have some self-control, but not a lot. Next up, I officially bought One of Us is Lying by Karen McManus. I absolutely loved this book when I first read it. It is very reminiscent of The Breakfast Club, but with murder. Essentially, these 5 teenagers end up getting detention one day, and one of them ends up getting killed, and the other 4 are suspected of somehow plotting his murder. However, each of them are hiding their own secret, and it turns out that the victim ran a gossip site. They all may have motive. We see from each of the 4's point of views. We have Bronwyn, who's the brain, Addie, who's the princess, Nate, who's the criminal, Cooper, who's the athlete, and then Simon, who is the outcast. I really enjoyed this book. I have to say, even though I wasn't a biggest fan of the end reveal, Karen McManus wrote a mystery in a way that I was constantly needing to flip the page, see what was happening next. I was still in school when I read this, but I was reading almost constantly if I wasn't in class because I just needed to know what was going to happen next. There's also a very cute romance in this that I loved. Addie was probably my favorite character. You get to see such growth from her, and I just loved her character arc. I really recommend this, but I will give a little warning for suicide in this at some point. Next up, we have The Witch's Daughter by Paula Brackston, which I'm going to be reading for my summer reading bingo. This is a historical fiction that also plays on fantastical realism, I suppose. A woman who was alive during the 1600s sees her mother hanged for witchcraft. However, she is then taken under the wing of a really powerful warlock, and he teaches her all of his secrets, including immortality. It then switches to present day, in which the witch is continuing to live her life but is incredibly lonely. However, she is still on the run from the warlock who trained her. I'm hoping, given the fact that this is fantastical as well as historical, will help me dip my toe into the genre and maybe find some new interest in it. Next, I have the first 2 installments of the Black Widow novelization series by Margaret Stohl. I borrowed both of these from my brother. I have Black Widow Forever Red and Black Widow Red Vengeance. Obviously, since I haven't read the first, I'm not going to say anything about the second one because I don't want to take the chance that there's spoilers. This story revolves around a young girl named Ava, who is the daughter of a Russian physicist. She was once experimented on and later rescued by Black Widow and S.H.I.E.L.D. She ends up teaming up with Black Black Widow when the two of them find that a bunch of young women are disappearing from around Eastern Europe. Black Widow believes it is the work of the man who trained her in the Red Room. I'm also reading this one for my summer bingo series, and I'm excited to get to read some more comic novelizations. Next up, I have Wanted by Mark Millar. This is another one on my summer reading bingo. This story essentially revolves around a young man named Wesley who lives a fairly normal life. However, he eventually finds out that his father was killed while working as an assassin, and the fraternity of assassins end up making Wesley join the fraternity and start to train him. Along the way, Wesley is determined to find out who killed his dad. But I'm definitely interested to read the original graphic novel that the movie was based on. Next up, into my new comic trades. So first up, I bought the second volume in the Harley Quinn series. I mentioned in my May wrap-up that I absolutely loved the first volume and wanted to see more of Harley, and I'm very excited to do that with this one. Harley is still living out on her own and having her own adventures, but unfortunately it seems that the Joker is coming back into her life. Hopefully she won't be running back to him, and I really hope she kicks his ass. Very excited to get into this one. Next up is the first volume of the new Batgirl of Burnside. I have a photo right behind me of this cover, so I am very excited that I finally get to read the story from that. I believe this was part of the DC's 52 reboot, as Barbara is back to being a college student. However, this time around, Barbara decides she is tired of living in Gotham and ends up moving across the river to Burnside. She's barely become Batgirl when she is suddenly already trending on social media, but also having to deal with kicking butt while also taking college classes and attempting to have a normal life. Definitely excited to see Barbara in this new style, this new universe, and in a new awesome suit. I also got the first two volumes of Spider-Gwen Ghost Spider with Spidergeddon and Impossible Year. This is a continuation from the original Spider-Gwen series, which unfortunately I haven't finished because I'm still seeking out one volume specifically, but I have these already. So hopefully once I get that one trade, I can start blasting through as many Spider-Gwen comics as possible. And then finally, I got the first volume of Miss Marvel No Normal. This is the introduction of Kamala Khan as Miss Marvel, and I got recommended this from one of my comic guys, and I'm definitely excited to dive into it. She'd been on my list for a while, but I just hadn't actually bought up any of her trades. Kamala is a young girl who suddenly finds herself with superpowers, as, you know, most people in the Marvel universe do. But she is a teenager and is having to also deal with everything that comes with being that, as well as Muslim in America. I'm so excited to get to read more about her. I think she's a very interesting character. I love that Marvel created her. Ow. I did see from doing a quick flip through that we get to see Kamala interacting with Carol, or Captain Marvel, and I am so ready for that, y'all. I'm not sure, but hopefully Carol also may become her mentor and help to teach Kamala how to control her powers better and, you know, how to be a better superhero. Maybe she'll toss in some like useful pieces that Peter gave to Miles. You're gonna want to put baby powder, especially in the joints. Let's start off with my unhaul. First one is SE Hinton, The Outsiders. This was the edition I had in like 7th grade. Although I do love this story, I don't really have any attachments to this copy itself. I don't have any annotations in it. I don't have anything highlighted. So since I ended up getting my 50th anniversary edition, I decided I might as well unhaul this one and keep that one because I don't really need 2 copies of the same book. I feel like this is a pretty popular story that most people have had to read at some point in their lives. It is essentially about this kid named Ponyboy who is in a group of greasers, and his group goes up against this other group of popular kids known as the Socias. Got a lot of interesting aspects in it, such as actual family as well as your found family, gangs, love. Next up, I'm going to be unhauling John Steinbeck's Of Mice and Men. I read this basically because it's one of those that is often listed on like 100 books you should read in your life. So I finally read it. It was pretty good. I mean, it's a novella, so it's pretty short. I think I read it in like maybe a day. It also was pretty sad. I was not prepared for it. This story basically revolves around these 2 guys, one of which may have a learning disability or something of the like. However, he is this pretty big guy, and so he ends up unintentionally hurting people sometimes. Because of that, he and his friend got fired from their last job, and while the friend often puts the man down, he still takes care of him. This book definitely looks at commitment, friendship, loneliness, hope, things such as that. It was a really easy read. I would recommend it. I thought it was pretty good. It's just not one I ever see myself rereading, so gonna unhaul it. Next is another classic. So The Catcher in the Rye by JD Salinger. I never had to read this in middle school or high school, but a lot of people did. And I know it's often considered like one of the top classics for a lot of teenagers. Unfortunately, I think a big problem that I had with this was the fact that I read it when I was in my 20s. I could not identify with the main character at all. Maybe I would have felt different if I did read this when I was still a teenager. I did feel bad for the kid because clearly he was dealing with some issues from separation from one of his brothers, his other brother's death, and things such as that. I've heard that apparently all teenagers should be able to identify with Holden, and dear God, I hope that's not true, because if I was anything like Holden Caulfield in high school, I sincerely apologize if I ever interacted with you. Basically, even though I wasn't a teenager, I felt insulted that JD Salinger thought all teenagers were this way. I know that's a bit extreme, but I had such high hopes for this, and they were completely and utterly dashed. I think I gave this a 1 star because this book killed me. Next up is Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. I got this edition for like 50 cents at Half Price Books, and initially I just thought it was because it was missing its dust jacket. However, when I reread this series end of last year, beginning of this year, I had started on this one only to find that a page had been completely ripped out. Who does this to a book? I'm gonna anti-haul this one. I don't know if Half Price Books will buy it again. We'll see. The final book I'm going to be unhauling is Atonement by Ian McEwan. This was a book I wanted to read because I was really interested in seeing the movie with James McAvoy and Keira Knightley. The story takes place in the 1930s. I believe World War II is just starting off. It revolves around many women in this one family. So we have the youngest daughter, Brioni, I believe is how you pronounce her name. We have the older daughter, Cecilia, and then we have the mother. We're seeing from each of these different women's perspectives and learning about the differences that come with age. So Brioni is like 13 and she's incredibly naive and innocent, whereas Cecilia is in her 20s. And then the mother, I don't remember what was happening with the mother, in all honesty. I was kind of bored. Brioni's innocence ends up becoming a bit of an issue, and she ends up seeing a moment between Robbie and Cecilia and thinks that is non-consensual, and thus ends up kind of ruining the romance that was blossoming between the two. I ended up DNFing this one. McEwan's writing is absolutely beautiful. I just wasn't very hooked by the story. I think the concept was a lot more interesting to me than the execution was. Okay, y'all, so that is it. Thank you so much for coming to my channel. I really appreciate it. Make sure to hit like and subscribe down below. I come out with videos on Monday and Fridays, but until then, I hope you continue to have a terrific day. Bye!